that was the experience that changed the trajectory of my life forever. I stayed up all night writing and just kind of re-evaluating everything that I thought about the world.
Yeah. Hey everybody, I'm so excited to give you this episode with my good friend Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey is the founder of On It, which he just sold for an extremely large exit. And in this episode, we dive into a lot of really deep stuff. We dive into psychedelics, we dive into religion, we dive into God and our view of God after, working on our spirituality. We don't tend to think that we know everything or act that we know everything, but this is just our viewpoint. So I ask you to go into this with an open mind. And we also talk about how psychedelics in our spiritual journey has actually benefited our business. We go super deep on this. I think you're going to love this episode. But without further adu, here is the episode with my friend, Aubrey Marcus. Welcome to today's episode of the Mindset Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Dial, and I'm joined by the newly retired Aubrey Marcus.
Really feels like it, Rob. Really feels like it.
We're going to talk about that. Not really retired, but had an exciting life event happen to you in the past month. But before we dive into that, I was thinking about it. I was like, if there were a couple of things I want to talk with Aubrey about, what are those two things? And the two things that popped up was success and psychedelics. And I would also like to figure out if there's a correlation between the two of them for you.
They're inexorably linked.
Because that's how I feel with everything as well. So a lot of people, if I go back to when I first started thinking of psychedelics, even eight years ago is the first time I heard about DMT. And I was inside of I was traveling for 3 months and I was backpacking and I was in Barcelona, and the guy who was running the hostel I was in was like, there's this thing that you can smoke and it kills you. And then you go to the afterlife and you come back and you're a different person. And I literally put up a post on Instagram or on Facebook and I was like, this guy's crazy. I might want to leave my hotel, my hostel. But I started researching and I was like, oh, the the molecule. And I put it up and all my friends started saying, he's talking about DMT, he's talking about DMT. And so I started actually researching a lot about DMT after that. Before that, I would say if you would have asked me if I would ever do psychedelics or what I thought about people who did psychedelics, I was like, they got to be like some crazy junkies that are hanging out inside of their rooms that have, black lights and they don't have a job or any of that type of stuff. But for you, it's a little bit different because you actually had, I guess, a rite of passage when you were just out of high school, right?
Yeah.
And so can you tell us a little bit about that and how it came about?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the great blessings of my life, that I was, brought to the path early. And right out of high school, my father, who was familiar, he was, familiar with Stan Grof's work and some of the old kind of OG legends of the psychedelic movement, and had experienced his own journeys. And he lined up, a shamanic rite of passage ritual with one of the OG shamans. And she took me out to her place out in the mountains of New Mexico. And I was terrified. I mean, absolutely terrified. I thought, because you've never lost control like that. And that's the thing that's so scary. It's like, what's going to come out when my conscious mind, which is in charge of everything, has its hand on all the controls, decides what I say, decides what I do. What happens if that thing goes online? What am I going to do? Am I going to go crazy? Am I going to take my clothes off and run through and that does happen. That does happen, right? So, I was terrified. I remember I grabbed a stone from the river, and I was like, as long as I hold this stone, I'll remember that I exist and that I can take control. And then, I go into this experience, this psilocybin experience, and I was a staunch atheist at that point, by the way. Like, nothing spiritual even crossed my mind. I was like, this is all bullshit. Yeah. I'd seen a lot of the horrors of capital R religion. I've gone to the dungeons of the Inquisition. I had a real distaste in my mouth for capital R religion. And so with it, I threw away all spirituality. Yeah. So I go in, I have my rock. I don't know what the hell I'm going to experience. And then I just felt my body completely melt away. And when my body melted away, and it was an indescribable experience, but my body melts away, and all that was left was my essence. Now, what do you call that? Do you call that consciousness, or do you call that a soul? And I was like, damn, I got to really rethink all of my philosophy about spirituality, because I've just felt the self that I've known melt away and something else be very present. Yeah. And so that was the experience that changed the trajectory of my life forever. I stayed up all night writing and just kind of re-evaluating everything that I thought about the world.
Yeah. Was it hard to let go for you and to let the body disappear, or did you actually give up somewhat easily?
So it was such a foreign experience and it was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there was actually some MDMA in the mix too.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
makes it easier.
I think that was the intelligence of the shaman, like
Mm-hmm.
the combination of both, because it was damn pleasant. And I've had some rowdy mushroom journeys that are a lot more difficult,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but that first one, whatever she did to dial that in, it was just like a letting go, and the experience was overwhelmingly pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't that hard at that point. It was so foreign,
Mm-hmm.
but she also did an amazing job preparing me. You know, she was like, listen, you're like in a movie theater and you're going to be watching a movie, but the movie is happening to you. But remember, just stay in the seat, just witness
Mm-hmm.
and allow whatever happens, whatever you feel, whatever you see, just witness and allow, eat your popcorn in the movie theater and learn. And she put me in that framework, you know, which is the framework that I always express to everybody, just witness and allow, like
Mm-hmm.
be in the seat of the movie theater, even if it's a horror movie
Mm-hmm.
on screen, even if it's all scary and it's demons and devils and death, and you're still in the seat and you're just watching the movie.
Yeah.
Don't forget, like, don't believe that you are the
movie
movie.
won't kill you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the movie's going to end
Yeah.
and you're going to walk out of the theater, you know? And that's one thing I tell people who are about to do DMT. I was like, listen, 1 hour from now, we're going to be eating snacks in the kitchen, you know, like, so know that from here to there, that's a mystery.
Yeah.
But right now we're in the kitchen, and an hour from now we'll also be in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and there'll be snacks. And, you know, it's
Yeah.
like that helps people, like, okay.
Yeah.
And then it sets the framework. So that's what people talk about with set and setting, just making sure that people understand, you know, what, how, and where to navigate
For sure.
the situation.
Yeah. Your experience is funny because it's similar to mine, but mine went way more awry than that. Like I was like, my first time doing it, I did ayahuasca, and my best friend's sister was like, so are you nervous? And I was like, I'm nervous, but you know, I'm just going to act like I'm in a movie theater and I'm just watching it.
Mm.
And I thought it was like that easy. And then I guess I had a really big ego when I went into it, and I had a whole lot of control problems because I got the shit beat out of me for like an hour and a half.
Well, ayahuasca is also a different type of experience,
sure.
right? Like my ayahuasca journey was 12 years after my first MDMA psilocybin journey led by that shaman.
Mm-hmm.
And my ayahuasca experience, of course you resist it, because ayahuasca works a different way. A lot of these medicines, they elevate your vibrational, you know, energy, your consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The language is always has so many connotations, but it elevates you upward to reach for something in your higher self, you could call it. Ayahuasca does the opposite. It actually brings you down through your density, all your fears, everything that's hard, and brings you down through before making that curve back up, you know, to the lessons. But it moves in a completely different direction than all the other medicines. Now, the other medicines can move you down into some stuff too, but it tends to not be the way that it works. Ayahuasca is always down first.
Yeah, it's tough.
And so that experience, I don't know anybody, myself included, who's gone through a first ayahuasca experience that wasn't harrowing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, as I interviewed Dr. Dan Engel a few years ago, and he said, well, let me put it this way. You can learn how to swim in the middle of the ocean if you want to, or you can start in the kiddie pool. He goes, you just decide to jump in the ocean. I was like, yeah, that's a great example. He's like, you should probably start with, you know, on the bottom. If I were to put him into levels, it's like MDMA is down in the bottom level. It's easier. There's mushrooms. It's easier. There's a few other ones that are easier. Then you have like above that is, you know, ayahuasca's in there. And then if you go above that, like the top
Iboga.
tier, it's like Iboga and smoking DMT are pretty much the two that he said he put on the top.
Yeah.
And so,
if we want to build this, some people might be interested. And look, this is all just talk. Any medicine, there's no one path for anybody. Maybe you were supposed to start with ayahuasca.
It happened the way it was supposed to.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
And there's like, so don't think of this as a progression.
Yeah.
However, if we wanted to make this stack, which this is something that people are really curious about. It's like, what should I do first?
For sure.
It's like, first thing, there's a lot of stuff that has no medicine.
Yeah.
Start with a float tank.
Breath work.
I actually think float tank first.
Before breathwork.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think float tank first.
Breathwork can be actually really intense too.
It can be. And you need like, that's going to actually, the float tank's just going to allow you to peacefully relax and ease out of your, conscious mind. And that's the sensory deprivation tank. Water at the same temperature as your skin. You're floating. It's black. And it's like just a way to give you a little bit of access to the meditative state.
Yeah.
Next, ecstatic dance. Because then you're starting to move the energy. And the point of ecstatic dance is to create a trance state where you just collapse your mind. And so all there is music and movement of your body. And that can help you move some energy. Breath work is amazing and very powerful depending on how you do it and who's guiding it. And it can bring up some deeply traumatic emotions, and it's an amazing way to move all of that stored trauma in your soma, in your body. As that book, the amazing book, The Body Keeps the Score, like we have a record of all the shit we've gone through in our life, and that's in our body, and breath work will bring that up. But I think that's absolutely like the next step before venturing into the medicines. Then you talk about the medicines. All right. You got ketamine is one of the ones that I think is on the level of, all right, let me get my feet wet. People often think marijuana, but you have to be mindful because the most challenging journey I've ever been on was when I ate too much weed.
Really?
Like I've done every
most challenging of everything.
For sure. I've done every journey there is. Iboga, which is 24 hours awake and incredibly painful, but the worst was when I just ate accidentally too much of a cookie. And I'm like, God, like this is hell. I'm so paranoid and so anxious and there's no escape and it's lasting forever.
Yeah.
Is this going to be my life? That's, so don't think that marijuana is like the easy way because it's nice if you have like the right amount with the right
intention
friends.
And all of that.
Yeah. And it's like, it's very good. Like I love it for yoga. I love it for body work, especially like, it's a beautiful medicine, but don't think that's the easy way. So I don't know where you put that, but it really just depends on how much. MDMA is another great one, as you mentioned. I think that's something that really is so pleasurable and experience, so heart opening. And when your heart opens, then you see the world in a different way.
For sure.
I remember the first time I did that and I opened my heart. It wasn't, just purely MDMA. I think I did it in the first ritual that I went through, but just purely MDMA. We were out in a city in Australia. I remember looking around at people and I was like, oh my God, people. I actually love people. I love this stranger. I love this. I love people. Like people are amazing. And of course the people I were with, especially. Yeah. But it was this just heart opening experience where you start to see yourself in others, so that was like a beautiful journey. Then of course there's psilocybin and then there's wachuma. And then you start to get to, as you said, I'd say ayahuasca, Iboga, and then 5-MeO-DMT. And, we could spend more time fitting the rest in there, but there is this kind of like escalation of intensity. But hell, if you have an addiction issue with opiates or something like that, maybe Iboga is the first one right out of the gate, and that's going to be a gnarly 24 to 72 hour journey, but it'll completely rewire everything that you're experiencing.
It looks like you got, I know you're working on book number 2, but it looks like you got book number 3 ready to go. Aubrey Marcus's Journey of Journeys is what you should take people through.
Yeah, at least an ebook.
Because there's a lot of people that email me and they're like, hey, I want to do ayahuasca. I'm like, I don't recommend anything because first off, if you're not in a good mental state, it's not going to make it better.
It'll make it worse.
Yeah, it's going to make it worse. Yeah. I've seen people do it before.
I have too. I've seen people try to hurt themselves in ceremony. And it's very, very, because it's going to push you right into, you have issues with, mental health instability. You're going to go to mental health instability. You have suicidal ideation. You're going to go into suicidal ideation. And if you're not ready to go all the way through the other side with surrender and acceptance, you're going to get stuck.
Yeah. Hey, let me tell you about my favorite drink that I take first thing in the morning. It's called Athletic Greens. Here's how I start my day every day. I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, and then I drink my Athletic Greens every single morning without fail. And within 30 seconds, in just one scoop, I get 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients. And it has everything that a multivitamin has, plus greens, probiotics, prebiotics, digestive enzymes, immunity formula, adaptogens, and more. And when COVID first hit, I ordered some for my mom out of my own pocket because I wanted to keep her immunity up. So if you're looking to upgrade your multivitamin or take just one nutritional formula that's going to help your daily nutritional basis, then consider Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens makes it easy to get high quality nutrition into your diet without the need to buy multiple products. So make an investment in your health today and try the ultimate all-in-one wellness bundle. It supports your immunity, gut health, and energy by visiting athleticgreens.com/dial. You'll receive a full year supply of liquid vitamin D for free with your first purchase. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/dial. Hey, these days it can be hard to find some time to sit down and learn more, and it's not easy with social media. They can be so addictive and so time consuming. So if you're out there thinking you might not have time to develop yourself, you should try out Blinkist. Blinkist is for anyone who cares about learning but doesn't have a whole lot of time. And Blinkist takes the key ideas and insights from over 4,000 nonfiction bestsellers in more than 27 categories and gathers them into 15-minute text and audio explainers that help you understand the core ideas of each book. And 15 million people are already using Blinkist to broaden their knowledge in 27 nonfiction categories, including self-improvement, personal growth, management, leadership, mindfulness, and happiness. So right now, Blinkist has a special offer for our audience. If you go to Blinkist.com/mindset, you'll get a 7-day free trial and 25% off of Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist.com/mindset to get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/mindset. Speaking of breathwork, we did breathwork in my, that's why our good friend Steven was out here and he was doing breathwork for us. And it was like, it's the first time I ever facilitated it. And it was so crazy to facilitate and walk through a room as it was going through, because it was like the room got dense. Like it was hard to walk through the room and it was like dense. You could feel the energy. And speaking of how powerful it is, I remember when the first time that I did, not the first time, but I did 4 nights in a row of ayahuasca. And the next 3 nights after that, they did 3 nights of breath work. And there was a lady that was there and she was super sweet. I took my mom down. We both did ayahuasca together.
Amazing.
And they did breath
I did
work
the
together.
same thing with my mom too.
Yeah, it was amazing, right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
And I wish more people's parents were open to it, because it's definitely a good way to connect. And there was this lady that was there and she was super quiet. She was super sweet. She was super nice. And she went through all the nights of ayahuasca. And then on the very last night of breath work, she raised her hand and she decided to talk as everyone's integrating and talking about it. And she said, I've thought about killing myself more times than I could possibly imagine. She goes, sometimes it's every month, sometimes every week. She says sometimes every day, sometimes it's every single hour I think about killing myself. And I did the 4 nights of ayahuasca, and this very last night of breath work, my little inner child came to me and I saw her face and I could see the pain that she had gone through as a child. And she goes, I could never take my life knowing that she's inside of me.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit. She literally had that feeling of, if I kill this, I kill her, because she's always inside of me as well. Right. And so even something like that can be, for a lot of people, super powerful. But I like the journey of starting off in float tanks, because the first time I ever did a float tank, I literally felt my body I couldn't feel it anymore. I was like, oh, I'm not my body. I'm the essence inside of my body that you're talking about. Right. Which brings up the point, because I felt the same thing happen to me when I did ayahuasca. Is I was definitely leaning on the atheist side, was raised really hardcore Catholic and then got out of it. And I was leaning towards, we're just worm food when we die. And I came out of it and I was like, no, there's something. I don't know what it is. I can't describe it. I was in this place where I feel like God is. So how did your frame switch from your first journey?
It's interesting. It's evolved. What I understood was that there was an unborn and undying aspect of who we are. Like, so that was what I felt first. Like, there's some part of us that is not linked to this physical form and exists beyond it. And if it exists beyond this physical form, then it exists beyond all physical forms. So it exists infinitely, eternally. So there's an eternal, which means that it also didn't generate, with my physical form being born. So it's unborn and it's undying. So that was like the first thing that I got. There's a part of me that's unborn and undying. But I didn't understand exactly, what that meant. And I think my first belief was it's actually a belief that the Toltecs, which was one of my first teachers, Don Miguel Ruiz, Carlos Castaneda. Now, I have to always say, Carlos Castaneda, if you read his biography, was a crazy but his philosophy is amazing. Don Miguel Ruiz, not a crazy is a true mystic. And one of the great teachers. But they believe kind of what I believed at the start, which is that this eternal essence is non-specific outside of the physical form. So it comes in, we are part of this thing that's kind of global and universal, like the unicity, the life force, love, source, God. And then we take form and we're just a piece of that. And then, and I thought maybe that's how it went, but it didn't really make that much sense, because I still felt like even as my body was gone, I had a separate self that was still aware of my life and aware of my existence. And it's not like I lost my mind. So I was kind of wondering which cosmology I really believed in. I knew that there was a part of me that was eternal, but did it remain as a, independent thing that reincarnated over and over again? Or did it just go back like you emptied a water balloon into the ocean, and then the ocean reformed a new water balloon and a new... But eventually I came to my own understanding of it through the years that, I do believe that we retain our mind. Just the mind expands to encompass all of the different experiences that we've had as this, segment of mind, this water balloon in the ocean, so to speak. And so that's where that came from. And then really, I don't think I truly understood God until I did 5-MeO-DMT, until I, which is also called Bufo. It comes from the Colorado River toad. And when I smoked that and felt God, that was the thing that actually set the whole picture in place. And I was like, oh, okay, this is God. It's not just a word. It's not just an idea like I feel it. It's the everything. It's the all sound. It's the all light. It's the all color. It's the every emotion. It's screaming and tears and writhing and ecstasy. It's just love and life expressed in singularity, and I felt that, and I was like, I get it. And then everything else is just the articulation of that one thing, the one being, but articulated in different ways so that we can experience each other. Because even that, in the singularity, it's amazing, but if you stay there forever, that's all there is. It's way more interesting to split into all of these different forms and have the journey of life.
It's crazy because what you're saying to a lot of people will make sense. And then to some people that have been raised a very specific way, it's like, I don't know, this is what I believe, and that doesn't really go with it. But the one thing that's been really interesting to me is that the more I have done psychedelics, the more I've done work on myself spiritually. Because the way I explain it is I did a whole lot of work on personal development. So I found personal development when I was 19. I went hardcore into that. I read everything I possibly could. I went to seminars. I invested money, got coaches, all of the stuff. And it's like, Dr. Joe Dispenza always says, when you're in the jar, you can't read the label. And so it's like, it taught me personal development was that I needed to get out of the label and read the jar. And then I did psychedelics, and I realized that there's another jar. And it was like, first off, we have personal development. And then we have outside of it, we have spirituality, which is a whole other beast on top of it.
Yep.
And the thing that I realized is that as I started learning more about psychedelics and then more around religion as well, is that all of the religious books kind of say the exact same thing that you're saying. It's just the only issue is it's being translated, in my opinion, by people who haven't had these amazing life expanding, conscious expanding experiences to be able to say, hey, this is actually how it works. They just learn from someone else about a book, and then they teach that book to everybody else. And
because all the words they're just approximations of the truth,
right?
And they can be interpreted in so many different ways. Like the word God, ask 1 million people, you'll get 1 million different answers, right? It doesn't mean anything, but until you felt it, and then you say God. And it's not that you're like, I have an idea about God. I read this about God. You're like, no, I know God. That's one thing that Carl Jung said with a smile. He obviously, I don't think he did 5-MeO, but he found his way through his own mystical experience. It's like somebody asked him, do you believe in God? And he just smiles and he says, no, I know God. And that's a different position. And when you know that, then you look at the words and you're like, what do these words actually mean? What did Christ mean when he said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light? Like, what does that even mean? And you're like, oh, I get it. Christ consciousness, that feeling of the divine within, that's within all of us. That's what he was trying to tell us, that he is, it's all of us, and so this is, and you can read it in a whole different way and understand it in a whole different way. But without, as you said, without that direct experience and without being aware of just the human nature, the desire for power, the desire to create structure, the desire to have control, the desire to be the intermediary, because, you know, the middleman always takes a cut. You can take a big cut. And I think that's a big problem with religion is they've created this middle layer that just takes a cut and says that, no, we'll communicate to God for you. Yeah. But just give us what we want. Yeah. And the truth is that we all have access to God because we all carry the monad or the Atman or the Christ consciousness within ourselves. Yeah. I had and for everybody out there, we're two guys that are trying to figure it out. Like, we're not saying that we have absolute truth here. This is our, you know, work on ourselves and figuring these out. But I remember I had a conversation with my mom when I was back home. Took her out to lunch, and my mom's, you know, been religious her whole life. She was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, everything. And I said, you know, I was like, ask me a question about it, and then I'll just try to see if I can filter it through what I've been learning and what kind of makes sense in my own head as I'm trying to figure life out. And she's like, well, you know, and this is not to get any Christians pissed off, but she says, you know, inside of the Bible, it says, the only way to get through God is through me, basically through that way is some translation of that. Right. I said, well, if you look at it, could we agree that Jesus was basically like the highest form of a being? Like, as far as he got to a point that we're all trying to get to, we all want to try to get to, right? Absolute love in human form. I said, what if instead of saying to get through me, like you have to believe in me and all this stuff, what if he's actually saying the only way to get through God is to basically become me? And once you become me, and act as the exact same way that I would do. Like remember those, what would Jesus do? Yep. I mean, every single action that you take throughout the day is at that point in time, then when you're able to get to quote unquote heaven, whatever that means. And that's the idea in my mind of what Christ consciousness is trying to become that version of him. And with each thing that I do, Jesus wouldn't have judged the shit out of that person like I just did, right? Right. Maybe I can switch to the way that I think about people and the way I interact with people in my next interaction that I have today. The idea of judgment is a very interesting one, because when you really love, you love with unconditionally, right? We all agree, love unconditionally. Christ had unconditional love, you know, forgiveness to the point where there was no record of wrong. It's not even that Christ had to forgive. It's that he didn't even receive the insult because there was love already. Everybody was already pre-forgiven. There was love immediately and like precognitively forgiveness and love, like that state. So it's a place beyond judgment, like absolutely beyond judgment. And we understand, okay, yes, this is the divine ideal. But then at the same time, we still get twisted with all of these ideas of judgment. Oh, well, this is good. This is not good. This is, and you can understand that in the 3D reality. Of course, like doing harm to somebody is a lot worse than making love to somebody. Like, we can all agree on that, and one should be stopped and one not. But if you're really talking about the divine ideal, then you're talking about love that holds no record of wrong, that sees everything as an aspect of God. Yeah. You know, and that's something that I think people have a difficult time with, because we're so lost in the paradigm of judgment, and in that judgment, it's, you're doing this wrong, I'm going to withhold love, you know, and that's what so many of us struggle with is this, you know, idea of dad, am I doing it right? Dad being the, you know, the capital F father that we're always trying to live up to. And a lot of times embodied by our own father, but absolutely internalized, you know, and we learn it from our coaches, from our teachers, from our family, from society. We do good, we get love. And then so in our own psyche, we do good, we get love. But when you start to understand Christ consciousness, it's like, no, you love yourself no matter what. And then watch what you do when you love yourself. Because when you love yourself, man, you're an unstoppable force because you have nothing to fear. And without fear as an impediment, it's like a sprinter that's had a parachute behind him. And that parachute is all of the fear and everything that's holding him back. You cut those cords because you have radical self-love, you're going to be Usain Bolt heading through the world. You know, it's like, you're just not going to be afraid. You're going to take chances. You're going to meet people. You're going to show up in a way that you're just going to magnetize as the next direction we're going to success to you because you're not going to be afraid. And people are like, holy shit, This
Yeah.
guy's on another level.
Yeah.
And every great thing that I've accomplished in my life is when I have that gravity, when I have that magnetism that comes from love, and it comes from this feeling like I am a magical being. I can feel it. And then things will just draw themselves to me. And of course I navigate and I go, but there's something ineffable about those moments.
Yeah.
And those are like, I can identify those key moments in my life where I really felt that, and I really felt supported from, the universe. And then the rest is just surfing the momentum that was created from that gravity.
Hey, if you're looking for a great gift or just something to add character to your house, try out Aura Digital Frames. They're beautifully designed Wi-Fi frames that connect people around the world through a delightful photo sharing experience. All you have to do is download the app, set up the frame in minutes, and add photos. And it has free unlimited storage, so you and the entire family can share thousands of photos. And when you hear the phrase digital frame, you tend to think of some plastic, cheap-looking thing that's an eyesore. Not Aura frames. These are gorgeous. They're living room-worthy frames that are shockingly simple to set up, that make it easy to put in very high quality photos, and it also has auto brightness that adjusts your display, meaning your photos always look their best. And Aura is offering Mindset Mentor listeners $30 off their Carver Wi-Fi frames. All you have to do is visit auraframes.com/mindset. That is AURA frames.com/mindset. Alan Watts talks about the reason why people have so much trouble. One of the reasons why people have so much trouble with the idea of God is because the gods in our universe growing up as a child are our parents. And we could say, even if you have the best parents, like they love me unconditionally, but it's very, very rare to find unconditional love in human form, because even as a child, your parents need to keep you safe. So there's something, if you go do something crazy, they're going to have to reprimand you. That feels as a child as if love is being pulled away from me, because that's the thing that we worry about the most. And so the capacity that we can, until we do a lot of work and think about the capacity that we can understand what God's love would be, is the capacity that we see our parents being able to love us, which is why it's hard to understand full acceptance no matter what. And so one of the things Alan Watts says that deals with kind of what you're talking about is why we struggle with the idea of God, which I actually struggled for a long time actually saying God, which is interesting. It's like just the acceptance of God. And then I also struggle with talking about Jesus and accepting that, because I felt like there was a lot in my past that had to do with that. He says that the reason why we struggle with that is because we can't comprehend what, even if you have really loving parents, you still can't comprehend what just full unconditional love is. And the reason why is because when we're growing up, our gods in our 1, 2, 3-year-old self is our parents. If your parents loved you fully, there's still some condition to every bit of love. And there's 2 people that I think I've met in my life that I felt as close to that as possible. First was my grandfather. My grandfather was just like the most loving person ever. And so I was actually in his hospice the day he died. I was there when he died. But the night before, he was eating his favorite food, which was my cousin's lobster bisque from his restaurant. And I was eating it, my cousin was eating it, my mom was eating it, my grandfather was eating it. And I finished my lobster bisque before he did. And this thought came in my head, and I journaled it that night. I said, if I were to ask my grandfather for his lobster bisque, he would have given it to me. Not any question asked. He would have seen more joy in his last meal watching me eat his favorite meal than for him to eat his favorite meal. And I was like, oh my God, I've never experienced some form of like somebody being that giving. So he's the person that I strive to be. I wake up every morning and I meditate and think, how can I bring his aspects into me? Because he's the closest in human form that I've seen. The second thing was I was at Jay Shetty's, a friend of mine, and he invited me to go see his guru, Radhanath Swami. And there was a huge line to see him after. And I was like, people were signing books and he was talking to people. And Jay's like, did you meet him yet? And I was like, nah, I don't want to, he's busy and stuff. And he's been there for 2 hours. And he's like, you got to meet him. I'll bring you up last if you're still around. And so I brought him up, and I've never seen someone so present with me. It was like the entire world disappeared. Yeah. And like the stillness that he had and the way he looked in my eyes. And it was like I could have said anything, and no matter what I said, wouldn't have made him love me less.
Wouldn't have made him flinch. And
he literally just met me. And so I always think about those 2 people, and I think like, how can I bring that level every single day to every single person I meet? Because in my mind, those are two of the closest people that I've ever seen that would be, from what we're talking about, Christ embodied in human form.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I have a similar story where I've had, really a couple examples of that, only. And one of them was my mother and my grandmother, and that line that came through, and, as close to unconditional love as you can imagine. And, I think a story that I love to tell about my mom is someone recently came up to her and was like, aren't you so proud of what Aubrey's accomplished in his life? Aren't you so proud of your son? And she's like, what do you mean? I've always been proud of my son. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, you think I'm proud of him now because he's successful and has a big podcast and has a great company that he sold? Like, you think that's what makes me proud of him? That's not it. Yeah. I've been proud of him from the moment he was born.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I was like, it's true. Oh God, that's so much love. And my grandma was the same way. That's why I have my grandma tattooed on my arm. And
nice.
One day I'm sure my mom will find her place on my skin as well, as she's in my heart. And so in the family I had that. But even still, I have to say that the challenge is that as a human being, attention can seem like love. My mom's loved all my sisters the same way. But I think because I was older and because I was an athlete and a competitive athlete, I was playing basketball and big Texas basketball and thousands of fans, and it was crazy when I was playing. It was like a big deal. So much, and my mom was she was a semifinalist at Wimbledon. She was an athlete, so I got an undue amount of attention just from what I was doing. I was older, I was competing, I was doing all these things, and so I think even to my sisters, even though my mom loved her the same way, they didn't get quite as much attention as I did. So their experience isn't exactly the same as mine, and it's not, what do you do as a human being? Like my mom she was drawn to this and I was doing this thing, and she wasn't like trying to give less attention. It just naturally flowed that way. Yeah. So it's very hard in human form, even when you're coming from that place of love always. It's very hard. But again, to go to the guru level, my experience with that was Don Miguel Ruiz. I spent a week with him down in Mexico, down in Punta Mita. And the moment I met him, and he's the author of the 4 Agreements, Mastery of Love, a Toltec master from a long lineage. And when I met him, he hugged me as if like I was his long lost brother that he's always been waiting to see, and it was like, holy shit. You just met me. And this was like the most present, like warm embrace. He was that way the whole week. And not only towards me, but towards the world. Like every night we would have a sunset, and the sunset was relatively the same. The weather was kind of the same, but he would look out at that sunset like it was the most beautiful sunset he'd ever seen. And he'd never seen one before in his life. Just pure awe and joy. And he would drink a glass of house red wine, nothing special. And he would sip it like it was the finest Brunello di Montalcino in the world, right? Like everything he did was in such awe and presence and rapture. I was like, okay, something else is possible. All of this personal growth, all of this stuff. Like there's another level that's possible. For sure. And I believed it because I saw it in human form. It's like the person who does the first double backflip on a motorcycle or whatever. It's like, that's impossible. And then someone does it. And then everybody's like, oh, no, it's possible. And I can do that shit too. And then in the next X Games, 10 people do it. Right.
Yeah. It's like the 4-minute mile where it's like, 4-minute mile finally happened and 200 people in the next 2 years did or something. Yeah. Well, you bring up something that I want to talk about. I want to dive into if we could, because I was talking with a friend of mine, and she does she has a lot of journeys with people. She helps people go through journeys and works them as well. And we were at a coffee shop, and she said, she works with a lot of pretty high level entrepreneurs, most of them all millionaires, and she's helping them kind of unprogram kind of what got them there a lot of times. And, I don't know about you, but, and I'd like to dive into that as well in just a minute. But when I hit a certain level that I thought was a level I've always wanted to hit in life, and I hit the goal and I checked it off, I was like, what the fuck do I do now? It's just that feeling of, I don't know what my life is if I'm not shooting for this thing, because I've always shot for this thing. Right. But what she said is that she's found that, and I would agree with her, that the majority of people who are high, hardcore achievers usually have some sort of disconnection with their father. And it's usually one of two things. Either number one, they feel like it's some sort of way that they have to get their father's love through achievement. Or number two, their father was an alcoholic or had some sort of neglect through some sort of external drug or alcohol. And I was like, oh, type 2. Like, that was me. I was like, you figured me out, right?
Yeah.
And then I look at my best friend, even though he's got an amazing dad, I was like, oh, he's type 1. Like, it made so much sense. Because for me, if you know my story, so my father, my parents got divorced when I was 10 because he was an alcoholic. He passed away when I was 15 from being an alcoholic. And that was like my awakening to like, oh my God, this thing ends. Like, this actually does end. And for me, that was the thing is I felt like there was a part of me that was trying to achieve for safety, but there was also a part of me that was trying to achieve to prove him wrong. Like, there was a part of me that as I started doing work, I think that as a child, I felt like I was number 2 to alcohol. Like, my father loves alcohol more than he loves me. So even though he's dead, I'm going to prove why he should have loved me more going back. So with your father, do you feel like there was either type 1 is why, that's why you left type 1?
Yeah. And that's I've never heard it described that way, you know, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Start thinking of a lot of your friends. You're going to go, oh, no,
yeah, it's for sure. And, you know, I had a great relationship with my dad, but even in subtle ways, like, it became incredibly apparent that I received love when I did good. Right. You know, whether that was like the difference on the car ride home when I scored 26 points or when I scored 6 points, you know, on the basketball court was palpable. Really? I mean, it was like celebratory. We're listening to like Motown music on the way home. We're talking about the game and he's excited and I feel like he loves life and loves me. And then, you know, I don't do so good and, you know, music's off. He's not doing it on purpose, but he's just down, you know, and I feel like, oh man, I let my family down and let myself down. And then I get on to the own judgment of self. And that was just athletics, but apply that to everything. You know, I got B's on my report card. I remember I came home and I was like, well, Dad, it's looking like a sea of B's, you know, like an ocean of B's. And he looks at me with just like horror. He's like, what do you mean? Like, and I was like, wow, and I was like, all right, A's from here on out, you know, like magna cum laude, I get it. You know, like, this is the way. It's like, if I want to be loved, it's A's, you know, it's not B's. And that idea, you know, applied to a myriad different things. Didn't matter if I played a good chess match, or it didn't matter if I did good in martial arts, or whatever the thing was, it didn't matter. It always felt like he loved me more when I did something awesome. Yeah.
Do you feel like there was a moment that you can remember where you kind of woke up to that? And the reason why I asked is kind of what I said, where it's like, I woke up to the fact where I went, all right, I have this financial number I want to hit. And when I hit, I was like, what do I do now? And in reality, I'll truthfully honest, the first time I've ever said it, I ate a bunch of mushrooms that day. Cause I was like, now I need to figure it out. That's what I need to do. So I went into a retreat center that's literally that day. I planned it. I was like, I think I'm going to hit it this day. And I hit it that day. And I rented a place at a retreat center. I went out in the middle of the woods. It was down in San Marcos. And I was like, I just got to do a bunch of mushrooms and figure out my life, because I don't know what my life is. Even though I've always wanted to help people and all that, there was a little bit of a driver behind of, you got to make this amount of money. You've got to get to this number. You've got to do this. And once I hit it, I was like, what motivates me anymore? I've got to figure it out. Did you ever have a moment where you kind of woke up and you're like, yeah, I've checked all of the boxes. I've got everything that I need. What is driving me anymore? Did you ever have that feeling?
The challenge for me is that very quickly I switched from, you know, financial goals, physical goals, you know, like all of these different things that were very tangible, to I always felt this. I felt like I had a deep contribution that I could give to the world. And so my goals have always been someone in that second mountain paradigm, you know, and of course I've driven hard for success, but the success, besides like selfish desires for pleasure and to experience things. Of course, when I was single, it was to attract a mate. You know, I'm not saying that my ego wasn't involved in, you know, building the successful life that I had, but always with that was the main reason that I'm doing this is to have the resources, to have a have a platform that I can share my ideas with the world, because I'm here to make an impact on the world. So, and I measure myself and measure my worth based on my impact on the world. And I've never quite shed that paradigm. So even with the sale of On It, which was a massive financial, event, massive liquidity event for me, I didn't feel much other than now even more pressure to do more good for the world, because I'm constantly measuring myself by that. And it's a tricky thing, because as soon as you reduce that to metrics, you're going to be chasing something that is never going to be satisfying. And so what I really deeply understand is that my contribution to the world is like the guru that you met and like the guru that I met. It's not about how many books Don Miguel Ruiz sold. It's about that he shows people when he meets them that something else is possible. And that's an even greater gift than the 4 agreements. Yeah. Both are great, and I'm going to write books too. But if I could get to that level, that's the most important thing. And that has nothing to do with metrics. You can't measure that. You can't put that on a stat sheet, what you felt when you met that guru and what I felt when I met Don Miguel. You just can't measure it. It's immeasurable. It's ineffable. And that's the thing that I really am working on trusting, not trying to measure my success by my contribution to the world, by podcast downloads, or by how many copies of my book is sold, or how many likes I get on this video or views. It's tricky, because you do want to strive for those things, but you don't want to be attached to those things. Yeah. And I'm still in that, to be quite honest, just still in that process of really trusting that, focus on being that type of person that I want to be, and allow everything to naturally flow as an emanation from that, while at the same time having a team and having the support to make sure that the magic that I do have, is allowed to breathe and travel to all the places it needs to go. Yeah.
I love that, because I had, few hour ceremony where I had the mushrooms that day. And the only thing that kept coming up, and I was like, it's gotta be better. It's gotta be something else besides this, was chop wood, carry water. Yeah. Like, you're already doing it. Just keep doing what you're doing. And the way that I see it, and I'm curious if you see it the same way, is, I've been blessed with a lot of challenges that have gotten me to be able to, get to the point where I am, and to be able to do whatever it is that we do. But the thing that I think that it's the reason why I've been blessed in the way I've been blessed is so I can then take all of that, and it's like gasoline on top of a fire. Yeah. What you're saying is, now that you have this massive sale of On It, and you've got this influx that you probably never had in your entire life, you now have way more opportunities with that to be able to spread whatever message you feel is the right type of message for people to be able to see, and not feel like you're held back in any sort of way.
Yep.
You're able to go, all right, you know what? I do want to make a video that I think could possibly go viral, and you put out there, you go, you know what? I do want to make another documentary around something, and put it out there for the world, because it's all cyclical. It just comes in to go out. And if you've been given a lot, if you're blessed, if I've always said, if you're blessed, be a blessing, just allow it to go out. The one thing that's relieved a lot of pressure from me, as far as feeling like I have to get more podcast episodes or more videos out there, all of that is, I think it was Ram Dass. I read it a few months ago, and he said, what if the purpose of your life was not to go and achieve all these things that you thought you wanted to achieve, but it was just to smile at that person who's giving you a coffee, or to just open the door for that one person? Like, as long as you did that one thing, your life is art. The purpose of your life has already been achieved. Yeah. There's nothing else that you need to do except for just literally smile at that person. How much weight does that relieve off your shoulders to go, I've already done what needs to be done. Now it's just all play. Right.
And I get it. And like, it makes so much sense. The real work is done in the privacy of your own heart. And that's your job, is like, what's going on there. And I intellectually understand that, and I've felt it, and I've touched it, and I've tasted it, and I can feel that. And then, but very easily I slip back into those old patterns, that old thing about external first before internal, and sacrifice. And then I'll make justifications for doing things that are not helpful for me internally because of some external result. Well, I got to do this thing because this is an important thing. Yeah. And so this is the journey that I'm currently on. But absolutely, what you said makes sense. And I think when I'm able to trust that, fully. I actually think not only is that going to, help me accomplish what really matters, it's also going to help everything externally. And I've seen that happen. Like the more internal work I do, the easier everything becomes externally. Yeah. But still, it's just difficult to rewire and rewrite those old patterns.
100%.
But I'm doing it. I mean, I'm doing it. Like I get it, and I agree 100%. And let's go. But then again, me even saying that is like, yeah, let's go, let's try. It's like let go, not let's go. Yeah. Let's let go. Let go of all the weight.
Yeah. I remember my grandfather said, literally when he was in hospice, he goes, I hope I get to heaven. And I was like, if he's still curious about if he's going to get there, what am I going to be like in my the last days that I'm alive? And so it's like, I always tell people, like, I don't ever see this as a journey that ends. Like we're like a flower. Once we get rid of other petals, another petal pops up that we need to work on. And that's part of the reason why I have this. I literally got this tattoo is because the 10,000 hour rule, it's the Roman numeral for 10,000, is like 10,000 hour rule, as you know, says, you master something in 10,000 hours. I don't know if I'll ever master myself, but I'm fully okay with getting to my life and not having mastered and just going, you know what? I'm going to do the best that I can each and every day and just let go and see what happens. And that for me, and this is the perfect transition into it, has actually grown my business more than anything else, I think. And so what I said I wanted to talk about is how psychedelics transitioned into helping me be more successful. For me, I'll give you a quick example. I know that the hardest thing to do as an entrepreneur is to be able to delegate. And if you have a control problem, which I definitely did, and ayahuasca beat the shit out of that the first time that I came in contact with her, and I realized that I had this control problem, it's going to be really hard to delegate for your business to be able to scale. Yeah. So that was one of the biggest lessons that helped me with life, but then also helped me with business and being able to grow. So I'm curious with you, along the path of working on yourself, psychedelics, did you notice that there was a line that was parallel in your company growth as you're working on your own personal and spiritual growth?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, I started so early that I had no momentum in my professional life at the point that I started. So it's not as easy to track. This is pre-psychedelic business Aubrey versus post-psychedelic business Aubrey, because psychedelic Aubrey has been a thing for my whole adult life. But I remember the first time I did ayahuasca, I actually on it was formed, but it was failing. I was making hangover recovery supplements and it wasn't working. The business was going to fail. And in the ayahuasca journey, I saw why it was going to fail. I saw that there was a way that I didn't fully trust what I was doing, and I was trying to be clever, and I was trying to be, just make the clever thing for this clever niche and whatever. And it's like, no, you just you put something out that's amazing and you trust, and you just call it what it is, and you just put it out there, make it as honest and natural, and really put this energy that I'm showing you. This is what ayahuasca was saying, like put this energy that I'm showing you and unkink all of the hoses of your cleverness and just allow it to be, and it's going to work. And I saw it like this beating heart. And that was such a beautiful message that I got. And of course, from there, my relationship with Joe Rogan, which was already formed, but that got solidified, and then Alpha Brain was formed, and then on it always followed that line of just clear out all the clever, tricky stuff and just put out something that energetically is clean and pure. And the universe is going to respond to that. And it did, and that's, and as I said, every thing that I've accomplished has really been from that place of like, this is about being as true as I possibly can. I think that's why people like my podcast. It's why they like my book. It's just, I just try to put it out as honestly as possible. Yeah. And, what I've left on the table is a lot of the things that there's a difference between trying to be clever and just doing things in the way that fits with the system that exists.
For sure.
And I've left a lot on the table and just not even understanding how the system, algorithms, what the is that? Like, I'm just going to put this out like, but if I do this, it's going to, for whatever reason, be 200% more effective. Oh, well, I'll do that. Like, it's not like I'm opposed to doing that. It's not dishonest to do it, but it's been interesting because, you know, really it's been, we just put it out there and it's thrived. But I think now it's combining that same energy with just an understanding of how the complexity of the world works. And, and I think that's the kind of the harmony that I'm really trying to expand upon.
Yeah, man, it's interesting that you bring up authenticity in that as well, is because there's so many people that want to create a following or become celebrity, whatever. They're trying to do something in the world, right? Create a coaching program, all of that stuff, but they're trying to become somebody else. Right. They're trying to do what other people have done. They're trying to follow in other people's footsteps. And the one thing that I've found more than anything else is that the more authentically up you are and say that you are, the more people actually like your stuff. And the reason why is because people look at it and they go, oh yeah, me too. Like, I never talked about my father's death ever, like for 10 years, never really told anybody. Like, girlfriends knew, all of that stuff, obviously. But when I first started the podcast, I was like, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to tell everybody my struggles, and I'm not going to sound perfect. I don't want to sound perfect because I need to just share this. And my podcast has been the most cathartic thing I've ever done in my entire life. Just being able to share all of my flaws and messing up and, you know, just being fully authentically me, and have people go, oh, I actually love this version of Rob. Because it used to be, I've got to be somebody for somebody else and then they'll love me. I've got to be what they'll love, but it's not my true self. But when you step out of your true self, whether it's, you know, and people don't have to have a podcast or a following or any of that stuff, but even if they're like, you know what, I went through this struggle with anxiety last year in 2020 when COVID was happening, and I want to make this video and talk about it. Even if they have no following and they're just like, I just want to talk about it because it's on my heart to talk about it. People will get so much better of a response than they actually think that they're going to get. And I think that the world at this point right now is really struggling and starving for authenticity. And I think more people need to step into that authentic self and realize that people aren't going to hate them. They're going to only love them more when they step into it.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, there are challenges, of course, because some people have seen that and they've weaponized their authenticity.
For sure.
Like, they share some story about a point where they were a victim of something, you know, and they share that, and that's like their go-to thing, right? And that becomes like their shtick. And then they realize, like, oh, if I can summon some tears on this thing, like that's, so you do see that every once in a while, but still that's okay. You know, like it's still better the way is to share it truthfully, you know, but don't allow your ego to say, oh, by sharing it truthfully, I'm going to get this result. Just be honest. But another hard part about this authenticity is to share the awesome things, you know, because it's easy, it becomes easy. So you learn it's like easy to share the stuff that's hard. Like if I'm going through something challenging, I'll put that in a newsletter or whatever. But, you know, when I took my wife for her birthday and to celebrate the sale of Onnit, and we had all of her friends on a G4 jet that was parked in the hangar, and it was a surprise on the jet, and we flew and landed in Nassau, then took a seaplane and went on this yacht and had the most amazing time for 3 days. I honestly haven't even talked about this. This is the first time I've talked about that on a podcast, right? That's real. We did that. We blew it out. We celebrated. We had an amazing time. But that's going to get, you know, that is tough to share as well. That's authentically what happened.
Why do you think that is? Because I agree with you. There's a lot of people that say, oh, here's my Lamborghini and all of that stuff. But when you're not the type of person that's just trying to do it for other people, and you're just doing it because you're like, you know what, I do want to share this. I do want to show what my life is, because it is inspiring. Like, it is inspiring for me to be like, oh man, you know, we talked about it when I was over here before, because I saw literally your wife posted it. So not even you, right? So why do you think that it's hard for us to share our biggest wins? Is it because we want to play small and we don't want to, we dim our flames so that other people don't feel insecure around us? Is that what is going on there?
I think we have a deep internalized primordial concern about the bright light attracting the arrows, you know, which happens. You know, you post that and you start getting people who are jealous or people who are upset by it start attacking you. You know, like, there's nothing people like more than putting somebody who's doing well under their feet. And I think this is a big part that's driving the cancel culture and driving all of this. Is like, if you can take somebody who's been really successful and determine that you are a better person than them and they are underneath you, well, then you feel like you're standing on top of a mountain. Oh, well, they may have accomplished all this and had the courage to do all of this, but they're a person in this way, so I'm better than them. So they're underneath my feet and I'm above. And I think we all feel that. You know, we all feel like the moment we get big, the energy of the world is going to be to try and take us down. But really, truthfully, it's only a small portion of people that feel that way. A lot of people are like, good for you. Like, and I think it's just about it's a different way to look at humility. The way I look at humility is being willing to get criticized by sharing your authentic truth. Right. And that also means being willing to share, like, man, my life is awesome and I'm balling out and it's amazing. And also, man, my life is really rough right now. And despite all of these things, I'm going through an incredibly hard time. Both are truths that are scary. But I think the humility is to just say, look, I'm going to share the truth, and whatever arrows come, let them come. So be it.
And contrary to people's beliefs, when you start making money, your problems don't go away.
No.
And you don't feel any different about yourself. You know, nothing gets fixed when you start making money.
Yeah.
It's, it all comes up. And, I'm real curious to learn about another journey that you've done because last time I was here, your wife was talking about how are you still turning some place up here into a dark room? Is that happening?
That's right.
Because I literally saw the bathroom. It was the windows were taped up. So
yeah,
I feel like kind of weird and sadistic, really excited to do something like that. Like I want to go do it, but there's also a part of me that's like terrified as well. Cause I've done, 10-day silent meditation retreats and it was hard, but it was amazing. And I got a lot from it. Now there's a part of me. It's like, you know what? A week or 10 days or whatever it is in the dark, like what could that bring up? And I've had this conversation with a few people. They're like, why would you, there's no way that I could ever do that. Like a lot of people said, and I'm sure they've said it to you, there's no way that I could do that. A lot of people said it with 10-day silent meditation retreat. There's no way. And I'm like, why? Like, doesn't that make you more motivated to figure out why you don't want to go do this? Cause you're literally just not talking or meditating for 10 days or sitting in the dark. So I'd be curious for you to tell the listeners a little bit about it and what you got out of it. And now that you're literally turning part of your house into a dark room so that you can do dark journeys.
I heard about it in two places. One, Aaron Alexander's book talked about it as the therapeutic model. You go into a completely blacked out room for an extended period of time, usually around a week. And it was great for treating all kinds of different psychiatric conditions in the Czech Republic. And so they would use it therapeutically. But it's been a deep spiritual practice that has been around for a long time, from the Kogi elders in Colombia that raised some of their children in the dark to the, mystic Indian traditions, not Native American, but from India, the Hindu traditions, where actually the place that I went, they were trained in that school where they would actually go to caves and be in the dark. But what's interesting about it is, so you go into a complete black. I'm not talking dark. I'm talking black. Yeah. Like there is absolutely no differentiation. In front of your face. Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. Not a pinprick of light. So no matter where you turn, no matter where you look, it all looks the same. Eyes open, eyes closed. There's no difference, period. That type of black is essential, right? Because that's the disorienting nature that needs to happen, where you feel like you're in the void. Yeah. And then so for people to understand how that works, the place that I went in near Frankfurt, Germany, you have like a little room. It has a bathroom. Everything's blacked out. Then you have a hallway outside of the room, and that hallway is completely blacked out. Everything has double doors, and so even if someone's coming in, it's still blacked out. And they would drop off food in the hallway outside of my room in the blacked out hallway. And I would fumble my way over there to get food. They would ring a little bell. And other than that, it's just blackness, silence, and you're just there. And so many people, more than any other journey I've been on, people were like, no way would I ever do that. Wow. Like, no way. This is crazy. You're going to go insane. I was like, you're really that afraid of your own mind? You know, cause that's what it is.
That's it. There's
like,
nothing else.
There's nothing else there.
Yeah.
Like you're that afraid of your own mind. If you're that afraid of your own mind, better handle that, because that fear is not like, it's not like that gets activated in the dark. That's there always. You're always a little bit afraid of your mind. So go face that fear. Go look at it. Go stare it down. Look at it right in the eyes. Say, all right, what am I afraid of? What's here? What is so scary? And then dispel that fear by moving through it. And I wasn't necessarily afraid of that aspect of it, but I also underestimated how absolutely intense it would be. Because not only are you just wrestling with your own thoughts with no escape and just in this completely disorienting silent environment, around day 3, endogenous DMT release kicks in. And so you start having visions, and the visions don't stop. It's like an
the
ayahuasca.
whole rest of the time you were there.
The whole rest, they just build in intensity, flashing lights, and you're swirling in this kaleidoscopic. So the absolute black turns into an absolute, ayahuasca level DMT vision the
For
whole
days.
time for days.
Oh my God.
And it's incredibly intense experience, and so many emotions came up, so many different things. And I'm actually making a documentary about it with a documentarian named Ben Stewart, and really excited to share, because I brought in a blacked out tape recorder into the darkness so I could record some of the things that were going on in my mind. And I'm really glad I did, and then there's some footage of me coming out of the darkness and seeing the light for the first time. Probably the ugliest cry I've ever had in my life, when I looked out at the horizon and I could see the world again, and recognized that I'd taken the world for granted my whole life, taken my sight for granted, taken people for granted. And as soon as you remove all of that, you realize how much you love everything. But until that's been removed, you just were like, oh yeah, I'm going to the grocery store. I'm going go to a place where you don't have food for a week, and then go to Whole Foods, and you're going to be like, where have I arrived? I'm in heaven. This is amazing. And it's the same thing. Take away your sight, take away your communication, take away all of your comforts. And then you go back into the world and you love them with a renewed sense of vigor and awe. And so after that experience, I was like, I have to recreate that in my house. So that room right next to where we're podcasting is completely blacked out and just ready. And I feel it calling me back into the womb.
Yeah. So what's, by going through that, then what were your biggest takeaways from being in the dark?
The biggest takeaway of them all was that I'm afraid to love the world fully, afraid to even, my mother, who I talked about, feel her unconditional love, feel the love. My partner at the time, her name was Whitney, feel her love, I was afraid to feel all the love and all the joy for the world, because I knew that that's what I'm going to have to give up when I die.
Oh, wow.
So it was this recognition that I'm holding myself back because I'm scared to let it go. And if I love it too much, it's going to be harder to let go. And now, granted, I understand that my soul is going to exist. My consciousness will move on, but my consciousness can't hug people, can't taste food, can't enjoy life, and doesn't, have a laugh with your friends. All of these aspects of life that are so amazing, time, you have to give them all back to time, at the end. And it takes immense courage to really love life and feel that love for this world fully. Because we all know we're the only species that walks around every single day with a conscious or subconscious understanding that we have to give it all back. And that was a deep lesson for me. It's just have that courage, have the courage to feel it all, even though you're going to give it away and it's going to hurt, but do it anyways.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the conscious mind, because this is something that I would have never thought was even possible to even talk about before ever doing psychedelics, but it's helped after doing psychedelics, and it's helped with business, and it's helped with life, is I have this feeling you're talking about, literally saying the consciousness will live on after you. That's what you're going to have to give up, which then makes me question, are we in a simulation? Is this a simulation? I've had this conversation with my mom where I'm like, she's like, it makes no sense to me. We have some pretty deep conversation. You could tell I'm already starting to kind of give pieces of them. And I was just like, well, just imagine it this way. Because reincarnation didn't make any sense to me before I ever started to do psychedelics. And now I'm like, oh, I can see how this is a thing. It makes sense to me. I said, just imagine like you would if you go to do karaoke and you're just flipping through. And it's just my soul and your soul, and we're somewhere off wherever this is. And we're flipping through this karaoke book, and it says, Rob Dial will have this, have this when he's a child. His father being an alcoholic, he'll pass away. He's going to have these struggles. And then you're next to me and you go, oh, Debbie Dial. Oh, his mother, she's going to go through this. She's going to have an alcoholic husband, and he's going to pass away, and they're going to divorce before, and all of this. And we look at each other and we're like, should we go do it? Like this, is this what your soul needs? This is what this is the next level for me. And we both just decided to go in and do it. I go, how would that change your viewpoint of the way that you look at the world? If every single thing that's ever happened to you is actually by your own design, like you chose what this is. And it's kind of like, Ram Dass talks about free will is basically like being on a plane. The plane's going to go somewhere, but you can do whatever you want to on the plane. Mm-hmm. And so it's like we have this free will of this life, but whatever's going to happen to us is going to happen to us, and it's going to happen the way that it should. And then so I was like, would it make sense at that point that we're basically a spirit that's inside of a human body, and this is all just a simulation, but it's the most advanced simulation you've ever seen. Like if you look at everything being perfectly designed in every single aspect, like, if you look at how flowers right now in the springtime, they're all popping up all over my house, and I see all the bees coming and taking the pollen from them and then dropping them somewhere else, which then make more flowers. And that's how trees pop up, and apple trees, and it's the most, it's beyond what we can comprehend as far as complex, this simulation that we're in. But it's like playing a video game where it's going to end and then something happens after. We're just not really sure. What are your thoughts on the simulation theory with that?
I think the challenge with simulation is the linguistics of it, because simulation inherently implies artificiality, right? But at the same time, the way that you're actually describing it really resonates with me, that we are all as God. Yeah. Collectively, like this was described, I think it's Schrodinger who has this quote, the sum total of all conscious minds in the universe is one. Like everything added up equals one, right? We're all a part of this, and we're all co-creating with our own limited amounts of free will. And the higher a species evolves, the more will they have, the more they can move around. Like an insect is almost a perfect being, because it's just doing God's work always. Like a cockroach doesn't decide, I'm not going to clean trash today. F that. Yeah. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go on vacation. No, it just does its same thing. Fly's like, I don't want to land on shit. I want to go, I want flowers. I want to be like a bee. No, the fly does what a fly does. The bee does what a bee does. Humans, we have a lot more flexibility and a lot more choice as we're developing our consciousness, but all collectively, we're co-creating this experience. And there's so much of our life that we are creating and co-creating, and so much more, especially you follow Joe Dispenza's work and read a book like You Were the Placebo. You start to understand what we can do for our bodies, but also for our life, like how we can envision something and then draw that reality from the quantum realm of possibilities, everything that's available, and really kind of like tug with a rope and just draw that into our life by our emotional, belief in that reality, and start to see how much flexibility we have, but also recognize that other people are tugging on different ropes too, so we're in this just giant co-created experience that is perfect. Yeah. It's perfect. And it's fucked up, and it's terrible, and it's awesome, and it's amazing. It's all the things, but it's really perfect. And when you start to see that, then, the great spiritual teachers that I know, like I always say that you can tell a spiritual master by the sound of their laughter. Like they get it. Like we're here, this is amazing. We're here to learn, but we're here to play. Yeah. We're here to laugh. We're here to play. We're here to enjoy this thing as well. And that's when you really get it. When you really get it, you start to laugh, and you start to say like, all right, let's have some fun. Let's make this world better for everyone, but let's enjoy it along the way. Because if I'm not enjoying it and I'm trying to help other people enjoying it, that's not going to be even possible. Yeah. None of this is real.
None of this is real. And it makes me laugh exactly the same way that you do, where I'm like, all right, I'm real stressed out about this thing that just happened. And now I got to go put out a fire. And I go, none of this is real. And I'm like, oh, that's right. This is so much easier if none of this is real. I'm like, and then there's two things I repeat to myself throughout the day that I've just personally recently started doing that have helped me a lot. None of this is real. And thank you. If I just repeat those two things, I feel like everything kind of goes away, where it's like, all right, this anxiety that someone might be feeling, none of this is real. Oh yeah, this thing that's giving me anxiety, I'm not going to remember in 5 years. So it's not that big of a deal. All right, yeah, I could probably let this go. And if I say thank you, automatically I'm being grateful for stuff all around me anyways. And then if I'm thinking to myself, whatever this future ends up being, it's going to happen the way that it's supposed to. And if I can just be thankful and grateful for something that hasn't happened yet, it's like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, where it's like, can you create a memory of something that hasn't happened yet and believe it and be so grateful towards it that it does, like you say, it kind of draws it into you. Energetically, it pulls it into your reality to go, oh, this thing that I've been grateful for 2 years has finally come to fruition because every ounce of my body believed in it, knew it was going to happen, visualized it, and was grateful for it before it ever even happened in the first place.
If you acknowledge that power, then you have to take responsibility for everything that happened in your life. Then you can no longer be a victim. And then you have to say, oh, I had a hand in creating all of this. Everything that's gone down, I had a part. And this doesn't mean that it's your fault. It's not your fault that your father was an alcoholic, but every aspect of your life, like there was some co-participation,
for sure,
some way in which you saw that actually fed it, and it's not, but we all do the best we can too. That's the other thing that you all has to remember. Like, you can't take that new knowledge and apply it to the past and say like, oh, I should have done this differently because I know this now. That's crazy.
Yeah.
The one way to know that you did your best is that you did it.
Yeah.
Because we're always trying our best. So doing your best can only be applied to the present moment. And the moment we look backwards, that's where we get into judgment, and that's where we get into problems. So when you acknowledge how powerful you are, don't worry about the past.
Yeah.
Don't worry that you could have known this. You read a Dr. Joe book 5 years ago and you could have started earlier. That. You weren't ready yet.
Yeah.
Like, it's right now. It's right now only. Heraclitus says, no man steps in the same river twice, because he's not the same man and it's not the same river. You're not the same person. It's not the same river. It's a different thing. So accepting these things without the judgment of the past, I think is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And another element I want to share is, to go back to another point you made, the Toltecs have a description of how they look at life. You say, this isn't real. They agree, but they say that everything is your controlled folly. So I liken it to like playing a basketball game. It's way more fun when you play a basketball game for serious.
Yeah.
Like where it matters, where you're really trying, and you're like talking shit. And you're like getting fired up, and me and Sterling
it
are
gets
just
pretty heated out here.
battling,
in your
throwing
backyard,
each other
it's been
into
pretty
the
heated.
walls, and then at the end, it's all like laughs. But it's more fun to play it that way. But it's some part of your mind knows, like, we're just playing a pickup basketball game. It's just a game.
Yeah,
like, it's all for fun, and that's your controlled folly. When you get lost in it, when you think it's for reals, everything's life or death, your business thing. You forget, and the folly is no longer controlled. You're lost in the delusion of the whole thing. So that's really the way I look at it. And it's very similar. Like, and sometimes you do get lost. Sometimes I get lost. Sometimes I think like, I forget, I forget that this is a game, and everything becomes life or death. And then you step back, you're like, Jesus, I was really lost in the fog there.
For sure. Last thing I want to talk to you about, which is something that was really eye-opening for me. You said a few years ago, I literally remember listening to it on your podcast. You had Gabor Mate on your podcast, right? Who I love. He just had an amazing documentary come out called The Wisdom of Trauma that people should go out and watch. And one thing that you said to him, I was literally driving in a parking lot downtown in the place that I was living at. And you said, I think I'm addicted to stress. And I immediately went, me too. There's no question. I was like, oh, I'm addicted to stress. I feel like I'm addicted to stress too. And I've shared that on my podcast, and a lot of people have reached out to me like, Rob, I feel like I'm addicted to stress as well. Tell me about that, because I know a lot of people are going to get a lot from hearing you talk about being addicted to stress. And then what you've been able to, because this is probably a couple of years ago now, being able to pull from realizing that addiction.
the thing is that when you start to realize that everything you experience emotionally has a physical component, that we're our own pharmacy, and that pharmacy is producing cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline and all of the norepinephrine and all of these different compounds that we literally get addicted to.
Yeah.
So if anger produces a cocktail of chemicals that flood through your body, well, you do that enough times, you become addicted to your anger,
right?
And that's why you go to anger management the same way you would go to like alcoholic rehab. You go to anger rehab. You try to rewire these things. Stress is the same way. Whatever that combination of predominantly cortisol, but of course the other things I mentioned, adrenaline, norepinephrine, all of these different things that are created in different stressful situations, it becomes like your drug. And so there's a physical component to it. And then also the psychological thing that you reach for, what is really feeding this addiction in a way. And what it takes, first of all, awareness. I mean, I have my own thoughts about Alcoholics Anonymous and the way that they handle things.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know if it's necessarily the best way, but I think they have some things right. And I think the first thing is to acknowledge like, oh, I'm addicted to stress, and that's okay. And like start there and like realize, okay, this is an addiction. So that way you have the awareness that when you're in a stressful situation and things feel stressful, you say, am I doing this on purpose? Do I want this? Is this something that I want? And that actually starts to give you more agency, and that starts to give you more control. And I think that's the name of the game. Awareness is really the thing that is the most important. And to be aware that anything that you're doing habitually is creating a pattern, and it's going to take energy to rewire a new pattern. So every time we've been stressful, carves a groove, all of the epigenetic triggers, all of the different things that happen, all of the receptor sites for all of those chemicals, they're all formed. So the more we feed them, the more that goes on. And just carve a new path, carve the addiction to peace and presence and bliss, then that starts to build momentum as well, as you're carving that neural pathway, that addiction. So it's really like, I don't think you can escape addiction as a human being. It's just like, what do you want to be addicted to? How about we're addicted to love? How about we're addicted to that flood that we feel when we're addicted to love? And I think that's what the mystics and the gurus, they're addicted to. It's not that they're not addicted. They're addicted to love. They're addicted to presence. And the longer they're in that, the easier it is for them to be in it because they're addicted to it. And so if you switch that, it can be used in your favor instead of used against you. It's just deciding what you want to be addicted to, because I don't think we're able to escape it inside a body that has the structure that it has, where it just adapts to create the same patterns, conserve energy, and then the receptor sites for all of these different chemicals form to meet what we are actually feeding it. So I think that's ultimately the lesson, is just asking yourself, all right, what do I want to be addicted to? And get yourself addicted. You want to be addicted to love? Well, love everything. Love your cat, love your dog, love your partner, love your life, love everything. You want to be addicted to gratitude? All right, be grateful all the time. I'm dated a amazing girl named Maya who's addicted to gratitude. Absolutely. Like her gratitude practice was all the time. She was one of the happiest human beings I've ever known in my life. And she was absolutely addicted to it. And I was like, that's impressive. What a great choice. You want to be addicted to something? You're addicted to that because it feels good. Way better than stress or anger.
Because it's going to create the chemicals either way.
It is. You can't escape it. Yeah. So choose your addiction. Maybe that's another book.
Oh, that's great.
Choose your addiction.
I would buy it. Yeah. Man, good stuff.
Yeah, brother.
That was amazing. Thank you. I got one more question for you. I like to ask people this question. So I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase. They say that every person dies twice. So the first time is when they stop breathing. The second time is the very last time someone ever says their name. So in between that time, your first death, your second death, obviously we can go deep and say there's a million deaths that you might have after this with all the stuff we've been talking about. What do you hope that people remember and say about you in between that time?
I've thought about that, and there's a lot of ego wrapped up in that,
sure.
in that concept. There's this idea that I have to create a legacy where people know my name.
Your last name has to live forever.
Yeah. But what if my name was love? If my name was love and Aubrey got out of the way, guess what? No one's ever going to forget that name. No one's ever going to forget love. Love will exist forever. And you become the force behind the persona. And if you identify as the force behind the persona, you never die. That's immortality. You know, like, yeah, people will. There's a quote in Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Toltec Art of Life and Death, and he talks about, you know, it's a fictional story, and he talks about his guides and his ancestors talking about his life, and one of his ideals of this life is to remain faceless, to walk among the people and remain faceless. And the idea of remaining faceless is he becomes the force behind the life, that he's the light, but not the doorway. Ram Dass talks about this. Don't worship the gate, worship the light behind the gate, right? Like, worship what's behind it. And to me, that would be the thing, you know, is to like just contribute to that thing that is beyond the Aubrey-ness. And I think that's an ambition that's worthy of concerning myself with. And, you know, long way to go to get there, it seems like, but that's where I would set my sights.
You got a lot of time, hopefully.
That's right.
Beautiful. How do people find you, man?
Aubrey Marcus Podcast at Aubrey Marcus.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
I recommend everybody go to Aubrey Marcus Podcast and listen to it.
Thank you, brother. At Aubrey Marcus on Instagram. And if anybody wants to go through some of these initiations, breath work, ecstatic dance, I have an amazing community called the Fit for Service Fellowship. You can check that out, aubreymmarcus.com/fitforservice and apply. It's just a beautiful community. We meet 3 times a year, go through like a week-long experience together. The next one's coming up. We have one in North Carolina, and then one coming up in Sedona, and then the next one in Tulum, and some amazing coaches. And we have Charles Eisenstein and InQ and Satsang coming in North Carolina, and the Sedona lineup is looking ridiculous. So, and that's really the opportunity for like personal interaction with me as well. And then the Fit for Service Academy app is a place that has guided breathworks, guided meditations, guided ecstatic dances, and like a really intentional community in a course curriculum with some master classes. So that's available in the App Store. So those are kind of the ways to get a little deeper, and I do live calls on it for those communities. So if you want to get in deeper into the magic, and maybe you just feel that call for a community that's talking about these conversations, like, man, how do I be that third chair in a conversation between someone like Aubrey and Rob? That's the place that, you know, we've really tried to create, is people who are, you know, we can walk around to all the lunch tables and all the conversations are going to be something similar to this.
It's awesome.
And it's beautiful to experience that. So yeah, those are all the ways.
Aubrey Love Marcus. That was Aubrey Love Marcus. What I'm going to call you from now on.
That's it. That's my fighter name.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your time. This was amazing.
Yeah, brother. Thank you so much, man. And thank you, everybody.
Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to learn even more about mastering your mind, click right here and watch this video as well.
I see success and happiness as 2 separate pursuits. And don't expect happiness from success, and don't expect success from happiness.